Settle in and take a slow, unhurried breath. You've arrived in the quiet corner of the internet where history wanders at its own gentle pace, and where you're invited simply to listen, to rest, and if you choose, to drift away. Welcome, once again, to Sleepy Historian, your home for boring history for sleep, for falling asleep to boring history, for bedtime relaxation and soft storytelling, and for those long, slow explorations of the past that ask nothing from you but a willingness to let the sounds of the world fade into the background. Tonight's soft-spoken history documentary brings us far north, into a landscape where wind presses against the earth like a living thing, and where ancient people learned to survive winters colder than anything most of us will ever know. This is relaxing history to fall asleep to. A history sleep story for anyone who loves calm narration, archaeology, and quiet, steady reflection. Fans of Arctic cultures, old tools, forgotten lifeways, and even fans of Roman history who simply enjoy peaceful narration are welcome here. If this gentle kind of storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it genuinely brings you peace. And if your eyes aren't too heavy, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. There's something strangely comforting about knowing who else is out there, drifting off to the same old stories, letting the quiet rhythms of the past soften the present moment. So dim the lights. Let the cold northern winds quiet themselves at the edge of your imagination. Let the ancient hunters step forward, slowly and without urgency, their figures softened by drifting snow and the hush of a world long gone. Imagine yourself in a landscape where the sun barely rises, a realm of blue-gray twilight stretching across ice and tundra. Here, the ancient Arctic hunters shaped their days with patience, endurance, and a closeness to nature that feels almost meditative from the distance of centuries. This journey will follow 4 gentle arcs, immersing you first in the daily rhythms of life in the far north, then guiding you through the story of a person or event, then drifting into the quieter mysteries of archaeology and culture, and finally rising slightly into the contrasting world of Arctic leaders, trade, and the subtle hierarchies that shape survival in the cold. Move at your own pace. Let the steady tone carry you. And if sleep finds you halfway through, that is perfectly fine. These stories will continue without you. They always do. When you're ready, we'll begin our slow walk into the frozen world of how ancient Arctic hunters stayed alive in 100 below blizzards. But first, take one last calm breath and let the cold, ancient silence settle comfortably around you. Imagine yourself standing in the muted half-light of an Arctic morning, though morning is only a convenient word. Here, in the far northern latitudes, daylight is not a dependable visitor. In the deep winter months, it lingers just below the horizon, offering a dim blue glow that spreads across the snow like diluted ink. The ancient Arctic hunters, whose lives unfolded here thousands of years ago, learned not to measure time by the sun's rise and fall, but by quieter rhythms, the shifting winds, the settling of snow, and the slow, steady movements of animals across the tundra. Their homes were small sanctuaries against the cold, constructed with remarkable patience and intimate knowledge of the land. Some lived in low, domed snow houses, ingeniously carved from blocks of tightly packed snow that insulate better than many modern walls. Others built semi-subterranean dwellings, sinking their homes into the earth to capture the ground's relative warmth. The interior air was cold by our standards, but to them, it was a refuge, thick with the scent of animal hides, burning oil, and the gentle warmth produced by human presence. Inside, life unfolded with a kind of slow rhythm. Every movement was measured, deliberate, efficient. A hunter might kneel near a small soapstone lamp, trimming the wick made from dried moss, shaping it so that it burned with a clean, steady flame. The lamp oil, precious, rendered from seal or whale fat, burned brightly and silently, casting a soft golden curve of light across the walls. In that quiet glow, tools were repaired, furs were softened, and plans for the next hunt were discussed in low, steady voices. Clothing, too, was a kind of daily art form. Every stitch mattered. The cold was not merely uncomfortable. It was a force that shaped every decision. Hunters wrapped themselves in layered parkas of caribou hide, prized for its warmth, with the hollow hairs trapping heat close to the body. Their boots, made from soft sealskin, were flexible enough to move across uneven ice, yet sturdy enough to resist moisture. Women crafted these garments with extraordinary care, working with needles carved from bone, thread drawn from sinew, and patterns preserved through generations. This work was not rushed. It followed the slow cadence of life inside the shelter, where conversations drifted like smoke and time seemed to stretch out like the endless plains outside. Outside, the world held a quiet that modern life rarely allows. The snow absorbed sound, muffling even the crunch of a hunter's footsteps. If you imagine yourself there, walking cautiously across the ice, you might notice how every sound feels distant. The subtle whisper of wind, the faint creak of frozen earth settling, the distant movement of an animal under the crust of snow. Even conversation was subdued outdoors, not just to avoid startling prey, but because sound seemed to drift upward into the cold air and vanish. Daily tasks revolved around this environment. Hunters ventured out in small groups, reading the landscape with an ease born from childhood. They followed subtle signs, the delicate pattern of snow drift that hinted at a den beneath, the faint, almost imperceptible shift in ice that suggested the presence of seals below, the distant silhouettes of caribou moving as a herd, their breath forming pale clouds in the air. To an outsider, the tundra might seem empty, but to those who lived within it, it was alive with quiet information. Food preparation was an ongoing, methodical process. Freshly caught fish or seal would be carefully cleaned and dried, sometimes stored in the natural freezer that the Arctic ground offered year-round. The act was not rushed. It was part of a slow, ritualistic relationship with the land. Women tended these tasks indoors, while children observed, learning through repetition and gentle guidance. Nothing was wasted. Even bones were shaped into tools, needles, or small decorative objects that brought a subtle sense of beauty to their world. The daily life of these ancient Arctic hunters was not easy, but it followed a comforting rhythm, a rhythm of survival woven together with tradition. Even in the harshest cold, there was a sense of continuity. Fires burned low, snow settled softly, voices remained steady and unhurried, and above it all, the sky stretched out as a silent dome of shifting light, reminding them, every day, of their place in the vast, frozen landscape. As you imagine these moments, let your mind drift into that quiet world. A world of slow footsteps on snow. A world where survival depended on calm awareness rather than haste. A world shaped by cold and by the warm, steady resilience of the people who called it home. Soon, we will step further into their routines. But for now, simply rest in this first impression of their daily life. Quiet, methodical, steady as breath on a winter morning. When you picture the ancient Arctic hunters beginning their long day, imagine movements so steady and unhurried that they feel almost ceremonial. Unlike modern routines shaped by alarms, schedules, and the rush of obligation, their mornings unfolded in a soft, timeless progression. A hunter might begin by simply listening, gauging the tone of the wind outside, sensing whether the air carried the faint hum of drifting snow or the sharper whistle that warned of a storm. In the Arctic, sound was as meaningful as sight. Inside the shelter, the glow of the oil lamp slowly brightened the curved walls. Families stirred quietly, adjusting their layered furs, brushing frost crystals from their garments, and preparing for tasks that would fill the day. Children, wrapped snugly in miniature parkas, would awaken and study the activities around them. They learned not from instruction delivered sharply, but from calm repetition. Their education was woven into the quiet rhythm of daily life, where watching, imitating, and listening were as important as any spoken word. Before stepping outside, hunters prepared their gear with meticulous care. Their tools were extensions of themselves in a land where mistakes could be unforgiving. A harpoon was checked for balance, its bone or ivory tip polished smooth. A bow, shaped from driftwood and strengthened with sinew, was tested for tension. Even a simple act of tightening a bootstrap was done with deliberate precision. Not hurried, never careless. The cold rewarded patience. Outside the dwelling, the air greeted them with a weight of silence. The vastness of the tundra could make a lone figure feel small. Yet these hunters moved with quiet confidence. They read the landscape the way others might read a familiar book. A single line in the snow could reveal the passing of a fox. A faint depression in the ice could indicate a seal's breathing hole beneath. Even the formation of snowdrifts held meaning, shaped as they were by the restless Arctic winds. Travel across this terrain demanded endurance, but also a deep sense of rhythm. The hunters' steps created soft, repetitive patterns, their footprints trailing behind like slow, deliberate brushstrokes on a white canvas. They carried only what was essential: tools, spare sinew, a small pouch with tinder, perhaps a sliver of dried fish tucked inside for a moment of quiet strength. Their breath drifted upwards in pale clouds, merging with the low light of the sky. Sometimes the day involved tracking herds of caribou, whose seasonal migrations were vital for survival. Hunters observed the herd's movements from afar, noting how the animals spread across the tundra like shifting shadows. Caribou were essential not only for meat, but for clothing, shelter linings, thread, tools, even ceremonial objects. Every part of the animal found purpose, and the hunters approached them with a mixture of respect and necessity. Other days were spent along the sea ice, watching for signs of seals surfacing to breathe. Hunters often waited in complete stillness for long periods, kneeling beside a breathing hole with quiet focus. Their patience was extraordinary. Some waited hours, motionless except for the slow, measured rhythm of their breath. The world around them remained quiet, the only sound the soft brushing of snow drifting across the ice. In those moments, the hunter's awareness widened. They noticed the faint creaking of distant ice sheets, the subtle shift in temperature as evening approached, the movement of clouds and pale, low arcs across the horizon. Back at the dwelling, the day unfolded differently yet with equal purpose. Women tended the oil lamps, softened hides by gently rubbing them, mended clothing with rhythmic, almost musical stitching, and checked drying racks where fish or meat would slowly cure in the cold air. The work was repetitive but never dull. Each task was connected to survival and deeply embedded in tradition. Stories were sometimes told during these domestic hours. Softly spoken histories, memories of ancestors, myths explaining the world. The voices were low, soothing, like the steady crackle of a distant fire. Food preparation was another quiet ritual. Hunters returning with a catch would lay it respectfully on the snow outside to cool, allowing steam to rise in faint wisps into the air. The processing of the meat was careful and practiced, done with tools shaped by generations of knowledge. Indoors, the aroma of melting animal fat warmed over a lamp might mingle with the scent of drying hides. Meals were simple but nourishing. Strips of dried fish softened by chewing, warm broth made from boiled bones, sometimes frozen meat sliced thinly into delicate pieces that melted slowly on the tongue. As daylight faded, or as the sky darkened more deeply into the permanent twilight of midwinter, families settled into the warmest corner of the dwelling. The lamp flickered gently. Children curled close to their parents. Soft conversations rose and fell like a slow tide. The wind outside hummed against the walls, creating a steady, soothing backdrop that blended with the comfortable crackle of lamp wicks. Time moved differently here, measured not by minutes, but by the slow cycle of tasks completed, stories shared, and the quiet presence of family gathered close. In these calm routines of daily life, there was a quiet resilience that defined the ancient Arctic hunters. Their survival depended not on force or haste, but on patience, keen observation, and harmony with a landscape that demanded attention and respect. As you picture these moments, let the gentle rhythm of their world settle into your mind. The soft steps in snow, the warm lamplight, the steady breath of people shaped by the cold. And allow these slow, quiet images to bring you a little closer to rest, just as the hunters themselves rested after long, steady days beneath the silent Arctic sky. As the long Arctic day drifted onward, or as the extended twilight subtly shifted from blue to gray, the ancient hunters continued their work with calm persistence. Their lives, shaped by a landscape where haste held no advantage, followed patterns that were steady, deliberate, and deeply interwoven with the environment. Imagine yourself stepping once more into their world, where each task unfolded with a quiet purpose, and where even the smallest detail carried meaning. The midday hours did not bring warmth, but they did bring a slightly different quality of light. A pale halo might appear along the horizon, hinting at the sun's presence behind a curtain of winter clouds. This dim radiance softened the snow's surface and cast long, gentle shadows across the tundra. Hunters used this subtle brightness to evaluate the terrain. They could more clearly see the contours of ridges, the delicate markings left by animals, and the faint outlines of ice formations stretching toward the frozen sea. Some groups moved inland to check their traps, simple devices crafted from bone, sinew, and carefully placed stones. These traps, often set for animals like foxes or hares, reflected a deep understanding of animal behavior. The hunters knew where creatures might pass, where they paused to rest, and how they moved through the landscape in search of food. Even the placement of a single rock or twig was intentional, guided by knowledge passed down over countless seasons. Others focused their efforts on gathering materials rather than hunting. Driftwood, carried by ocean currents over immense distances, was a valuable resource. It washed ashore on remote beaches where ancient hunters sometimes traveled by sled or on foot. Imagine them walking along the desolate shoreline, their silhouettes small against the endless stretch of ice and frozen sea. They examined each piece of wood with a craftsman's eye, searching for shapes suitable for bows, sled runners, or even the frames of communal structures. In a world where trees did not grow, every piece of driftwood was priceless. Meanwhile, in quieter inland areas, families might gather in groups to share tasks. Women worked on weaving grass mats or preparing sinew thread. These activities had a rhythmic quality, strands pulled taut, knots tied slowly, motions repeated with a soothing consistency. Children assisted in small ways, bringing handfuls of grass, holding tools, or simply observing. Their presence created a gentle background of murmured conversation and soft footsteps, blending harmoniously with the more experienced movements of their elders. Inside the shelter, tasks became more introspective during these hours. Someone might carve a harpoon head, revealing its elegant, functional shape from a block of bone. Another might scrape a hide to remove its final roughness, ensuring it would be soft and warm when sewn into clothing. The scrape of a bone tool moving across fur created a steady, comforting rhythm, a quiet reminder of work done with care and patience. Food, too, required attention throughout the day. If fresh fish had been caught through a hole in the ice, it would now be prepared with slow precision. Fillets were sliced and set to freeze in the bitter outdoor air, transforming into lightweight, preserved sustenance. Other portions might be dried, stretched gently on wooden frames, or laid on snow platforms to cure. These simple preservation techniques meant that the people were never far from a reliable store of nourishment, even in the darkest weeks of winter. Water, though abundant in its frozen form, needed to be carefully managed. Hunters chipped blocks of ice from clean sources, often preferring river ice that froze clearer than seawater. Indoors, these ice chunks were placed near the warmth of the lamp to melt slowly. The resulting water was precious, a quiet luxury in a world where each necessity had to be earned through patience and skill. The soft sound of melting droplets, faint but constant, added to the shelter's gentle ambience. As the day grew older, hunters gradually returned home. Their arrivals were not grand or hurried. They stepped inside with quiet respect for the warmth and safety of the dwelling. Snow crystals clung to their clothing, glimmering briefly before melting into droplets. They shared information calmly about tracks they observed, shifts in weather, signs of animals. These exchanges formed the basis of their community's understanding of the land, allowing them to prepare for the days ahead. Evening descended softly. The lamp's glow grew warmer in contrast to the deepening darkness outside. Families gathered for shared meals, speaking in low, steady tones. A simple broth or dried meat was passed around, eaten with slow gratitude. The cold outside pressed gently against the walls, but inside there was a sense of calm unity. Sometimes in these hours, an elder told stories, not tales told with dramatic flair, but gentle narratives about ancestors who traveled across the ice, about animals who taught important lessons, about spirits believed to accompany hunters on their journeys. These stories were delivered in even, soothing voices, blending seamlessly with the quiet comfort of the space. As the night deepened, tasks tapered off. Children drifted to sleep, wrapped in warm furs. Adults rested, conserving energy for the next day's steady work. The oil lamp dimmed, its light flickering like a heartbeat. Outside, the wind might shift again, brushing against the snow house in soft, rhythmic gusts. Far above, the sky shimmered with a faint hint of northern lights, weaving slow, dreamlike movements across the darkness. In this final moment of daily life, imagine the ancient Arctic hunters embracing rest not as an interruption, but as a necessary continuation of their rhythm. Their days flowed like gentle tides, tasks begun, completed, and set aside with calm acceptance, their lives deeply bound to the land's quiet cycles. Imagine, now, a single figure emerging from the broad tapestry of the ancient Arctic world. Not a legendary hero in the dramatic sense, but an individual whose life reflects the calm determination of countless unnamed hunters who shaped their existence against the cold. Let's call him Akaluk, a name drawn from ancient northern dialects, meaning something close to one who moves with the land. His story, though softly told and without embellishment, represents the quiet resilience of a people whose survival depended on patience, observation, and a respectful relationship with the frozen environment surrounding them. Picture Akaluk as a young hunter in his early years, standing beside his family's semi-subterranean dwelling. The sky above him stretches wide and muted, filled with the soft glow of a winter sunrise that never fully rises. His clothing is simple yet expertly crafted, a caribou hide parka lined with the warmest fur, boots sewn from sealskin, and mittens that have been carefully shaped to allow both warmth and dexterity. He is wrapped against the cold, but the cold is something he has known all his life. It is familiar, almost comforting, a presence he acknowledges but does not fear. From his earliest days, Akaluk learned by watching. He observed the way his father tested the strength of ice by tapping it lightly with the end of a harpoon. He studied the moments when his mother softened skins, her movements slow, steady, and methodical. He accompanied elders on short walks, listening to their gentle explanations of animal tracks pressed faintly into the snow. These lessons were not delivered as commands, but as quiet guidance, woven into daily routines. One winter, when Akaluk stood on the threshold between childhood and adulthood, the community faced an unusually long stretch of storms. Blizzard after blizzard shook their snow houses and draped the world in swirling white curtains. For days, the hunters could not travel far, and the wind carried a deep, continuous hum that settled into the bones of everyone listening. When the storms finally calmed, the world outside had transformed. Drifts rose taller than a hunter, and the trails once etched into the snow by animals had vanished completely. It was on one of these post-storm mornings that Akaluk's story takes a gentle, memorable turn. His father and the other hunters prepared to search for seals along the frozen coast. But the journey would be difficult. Snowdrifts hid dangerous cracks, and loose ice made the path uncertain. Akaluk was still considered young, but this would be a chance for him to join the group and learn the careful navigation required after such storms. Before leaving, the hunters gathered around the small oil lamp inside the dwelling. Its flame flickered gently, casting long shadows on the walls. Akaluk's mother added fresh oil to the lamp, her hands moving in slow, practiced motions. She looked at her son with soft eyes, not worried, but watchful, as though reminding him through her steady gaze that survival in this land depended on clear thought and calm decisions. Outside, the air was crisp and very still, the kind of stillness that follows great winds. Akaluk walked alongside his father, each step sinking lightly into the freshly fallen snow. The horizon stretched in a pale band of light, giving just enough visibility to distinguish sea ice from land. The group of hunters moved in a loose line, spaced carefully so that each could read the terrain without disturbing the snow too heavily. Akaluk felt a quiet mixture of anticipation and respect. The hunt itself was important, but the journey was equally significant, an opportunity to prove not courage in the dramatic sense, but endurance and attentiveness. These qualities were the true marks of a hunter in this world. Along the way, the group paused often, studying the ice. Akaluk saw how the older hunters observed tiny details. The curve of a snowdrift, the pattern of frost along the ground, the faint lines where wind had brushed the surface differently. They spoke rarely, using gestures instead of words. In this landscape, silence was not a burden, but a welcome companion. When they reached the seal hunting grounds, they found the ice transformed. Breathing holes were no longer where they had been weeks before. Snow had filled some, ice had fractured others. The hunters spread out, searching for fresh signs. Akaluk moved slowly, testing the snow with the end of his harpoon. He knelt, listened, and breathed in harmony with the steady quiet of the sea beneath the ice. It was here that he noticed a faint, circular depression in the snow, so subtle it could easily be missed. He brushed the snow aside gently and found a thin crust of new ice covering a seal's breathing hole. He signaled to his father with a slow, deliberate movement. The older hunter approached, studied the sight, and nodded. Together, they prepared for the long wait. Akaluk knelt beside the breathing hole, his parka rustling softly as he settled into position. His father stepped back, giving him space, a quiet sign of trust. The hours passed with only the whisper of wind and the distant creaking of the ice. Akaluk's breath drifted in pale clouds. His focus did not waver. He felt the presence of the sea beneath him, a dark, cold world where seals moved with grace beneath the ice. When the moment finally came, it did so gently, a faint shift in the air, a soft stirring from below. Akaluk tensed, calm and ready, his harpoon poised. He made no sudden movements. Instead, he waited until the moment aligned, until the seal surfaced to breathe. The action that followed was swift but controlled, guided by training, instinct, and a respect for the life taken. When the hunters began their journey home, Akaluk walked with quiet composure. No one celebrated loudly. No one raised their voice. But the subtle nods, the soft murmurs, the way the group allowed him to lead part of the way, these were their signs of acknowledgement. He had done what many young hunters before him had done, learned to listen to the land, to be patient, to observe without forcing action, and to maintain calm certainty in a world shaped by cold and silence. Akaluk's story, though modest, reminds us that survival in the ancient Arctic was built not on dramatic feats, but on countless moments of quiet understanding. In the days that followed his first successful seal hunt, Akaluk settled quietly back into the rhythms of daily life. There were no dramatic ceremonies or triumphant celebrations marking his achievement. Instead, his accomplishment folded gently into the fabric of the community's routine, becoming another thread woven through the long history of hunters who had learned to work with the land rather than against it. Yet, even in this understated way, Akaluk sensed a subtle shift, not in how others treated him, but in how he saw the world around him. The elders, who were rarely outspoken, offered quiet signs of acknowledgement. One of them, an older hunter named Tullamak, handed Akaluk a piece of driftwood shaped by time and waves into a smooth, curving form. Tulimak said little beyond a few calm words about how wood in the Arctic should always be used carefully, shaped slowly, and respected fully. But Akaluk understood what the gesture meant. It was an invitation to begin crafting his own harpoon shaft, a tool that would accompany him for many years if he shaped it with patience. And so, in the dim glow of the oil lamp, Akaluk began carving. The work required not only skill, but an attentive mind. He had watched his father many times, seen how his hands moved with steady confidence. But this was his own responsibility. Each stroke of the stone blade against the driftwood was slow and deliberate. Each pause was filled with thought as he considered the grain of the wood, the natural curve it offered, and the way it would balance when the bone point was finally attached. Outside, the winter wind carried its deep, low hum across the snow. But inside the shelter, there was only the soft scrape of carving and the quiet murmurs of family going about their evening tasks. Akaluk worked on the harpoon over several days, pausing frequently to help with other duties. Each time he returned to the wood, he found new details to refine, a slight roughness along the grip, a curve that needed smoothing, a space that would later hold the line made from carefully braided sinew. Through this slow process, he began to appreciate how much of a hunter's identity was shaped not by single moments of success, but by the quiet dedication invested into the tools that sustained life. One morning, as another long stretch of twilight settled over the land, the hunters prepared for a different kind of journey. Caribou tracks had been spotted near a distant ridge, and the elders decided the time was right to travel inland. This hunt required a different set of skills: broader observation, longer endurance, and the ability to move in coordinated silence across rolling terrain. Akaluk was invited to join again, though no one made a show of it. They simply expected him to be ready, as though he had always been part of the group. Before departing, Akaluk checked his clothing with care. The cold inland could be harsher than the coast, cutting through the air with a sharper edge. He layered his furs with precision, tying cords at his waist and wrists to keep wind from seeping in. His breath drifted lightly into the air as he stepped outside, the snow crunching softly under his boots. The other hunters were already gathered, their silhouettes forming a quiet line against the pale horizon. The journey inland unfolded slowly. The hunters moved with a collective rhythm, spacing themselves to avoid leaving a dense trail that might alert the caribou. The snow grew deeper as they climbed gentle rises in the land, and the wind swept across the open tundra in long, steady breaths. Akaluk watched the older hunters carefully. They stopped often, kneeling to examine the faint impressions left by hooves. Some marks were fresh, their edges crisp and clear. Others had softened, their lines blurred by drifting snow. The hunters read each sign with practiced eyes, piecing together the animal's direction and pace. After several hours, they reached a vantage point overlooking a wide, frozen valley. There, moving slowly in a loose formation, was a small herd of caribou. Their thick winter coats blended seamlessly with the snow, and their breath formed pale clouds that drifted upward before dissolving into the cold air. Akaluk felt a quiet sense of awe, not excitement, but a deep appreciation for the animals that had sustained his people for generations. The hunters positioned themselves carefully. This was not a chase. It was a practice rooted in patience and timing. They approached from downwind, keeping their bodies low and their movements slow. Akaluk followed the lead of Tulimak, stepping only when the older hunter stepped, pausing when he paused. The world seemed to narrow into a gentle corridor of sound and stillness. The soft brushing of snow against fur, the distant creak of ice under the cold, the almost meditative cadence of breath. When a moment finally came, it did so with quiet inevitability. The hunters moved into place, releasing their arrows or thrusting their spears with controlled precision. There was no shouting, no sudden rush. The actions were fluid and calm, born from years of practice and respect for the animals. The caribou, startled but not panicked, moved in sweeping arcs, their hooves kicking up sprays of soft snow. Akaluk made his shot with the same measured composure he had shown at the seal hole. His arrow flew true, guided by the steady focus he had learned from hours spent carving his harpoon and observing the land. The caribou he struck fell quickly. A life ended with care, in a way that ensured as little suffering as possible. After the hunt, the group gathered around the animals with solemn appreciation. Each hunter contributed to the careful, respectful processing that followed. Every part of the caribou would be used, from the hide to the bones to the sinew. Akaluk worked alongside the others, his hands steady, his thoughts quiet. As they made the journey home, pulling sleds laden with supplies that would carry the community through another stretch of winter, Akaluk walked with a calm sense of belonging. Not pride. That was not the way of his people, but a quiet understanding that he had stepped more fully into the rhythm of the ancient tradition that shaped their lives. He had learned that survival was not a matter of dramatic triumphs, but of steady, thoughtful actions repeated day after day, season after season, in harmony with the vast, frozen land. In the weeks following the inland caribou hunt, the rhythm of life in the settlement shifted once again. Winter deepened, settling over the land with a calm, heavy presence. The sky often hovered in a muted twilight, neither fully day nor fully night, and the snow on the ground developed a firm, wind-polished crust that glowed faintly under the pale light. It was a season when time seemed to slow, when every sound felt softened by the cold, and when people turned inward toward craftwork, storytelling, and the slow strengthening of tools and skills. For Akaluk, the season brought a new sense of purpose. His harpoon shaft was nearly finished now, its surface smoothed by countless careful strokes. He had carved a subtle taper along the length, ensuring it would sit comfortably in his hand. The bone point, shaped by his father and gifted without ceremony, waited patiently on the wooden platform near the oil lamp. Attaching it would be the final step, one that couldn't be rushed. For now, he continued refining, letting the tool emerge gradually, like an idea taking form over many quiet nights. Inside the shelter, the warmth of the seal oil lamp illuminated small scenes of winter life. His mother scraped a freshly cleaned hide, working methodically with a curved bone tool. His younger sister sorted sinew strands, separating them into bundles that would later become bowstrings or lashing for tools. Every task had a place in the winter rhythm, and the slow, steady work created an atmosphere that was both peaceful and purposeful. The sound of scraping hide, the soft crackle of wick burning in oil, and the faint movement of snow sliding from the roof formed the background of their days. One evening, Tullamak visited the family shelter. The elder stooped slightly from years of travel across uneven tundra, but his eyes remained sharp and gentle. He carried a small bundle wrapped in caribou hide. Without preamble, he sat near Akaluk and placed the bundle between them. When he unfolded it, 3 tools appeared. An old harpoon head made from walrus ivory, a bone all polished from long use, and a delicate needle carved from a bird's wing bone. "These belong to my mother," Tullamak said simply. "She taught me that tools remember their makers. They carry the shape of the hands that made them. When you work with your tools, shape them with patience, and they will serve you long." Akaluk listened closely. The elder rarely spoke of personal things, and when he did, every word felt deliberate. Tullamak invited him to examine the tools, pointing out how the needle had been scraped thin and then polished with sand, how the awl tip had been repaired multiple times yet still pierced hide cleanly, how the harpoon head had been carved with a slight ridge to guide its flight underwater. Each detail told a story, not only of craft, but of survival, family, and continuity. Over the next several days, Tullamak taught Akaluk new methods of shaping bone and ivory. They worked outdoors when weather allowed, sitting near a low snow wall that shielded them from the wind. When the cold grew too sharp, they returned inside to warm their hands before continuing. Akaluk learned how to score ivory with a sharp stone before applying gentle pressure to split it cleanly. He learned to drill holes using a simple, bow-driven tool, keeping the motion slow and even to avoid cracking the material. The work required patience, but patience was something the Arctic reinforced constantly. During breaks in their work, Tullamark told stories of distant hunts, of walrus pulled from the edge of shifting ice, of polar bears spotted on silent treks across frozen bays, of long journeys made with dogs who knew the land almost better than people. The elder's voice was soft, steady, and strangely soothing. His stories blended memory with teaching, offering Akaluk a sense not only of what had been done in the past, but how and why. As midwinter approached, the community prepared for a significant event, the Long Night Gathering. It was not a festival in the ornamental sense, but a shared pause in the coldest stretch of the year, a time to gather in the communal shelter, share food, strengthen spirits, and exchange stories that connected the present generation to ancestors stretching far into the past. Akaluk had attended the gatherings all his life, but this year felt different. He felt more a part of the adult world now, more aware of the meaning behind the stories, and more conscious of the lineage of hunters to which he was slowly becoming tied. On the evening of the gathering, the largest snow shelter in the settlement glowed warmly from within. People arrived in groups, shaking snow from their shoulders, carrying small bundles of food or tools to share. The air inside was warm with breath and laughter, the lamplight reflecting off polished bone, fur, and the smooth inner surface of the snow walls. Akaluk sat near the back at first, as he always had, but Tullamark beckoned him forward to sit beside the other hunters. His heart lifted slightly at the gesture. The gathering began with quiet conversation as people settled. Then one of the eldest women began a song. A low, steady chant carried on breath rather than melody. Her voice wove through the room like smoke drifting through still air. The chant spoke of ancestors who had hunted caribou along the same ridges Akaluk had walked, who had carved tools with the same patience, who had lived through winters far harsher than the present one. It was a reminder that their lives were part of something wide and enduring, something strengthened by every generation that added its efforts to the whole. After the chant, others shared stories. Tullamark told of the time he tracked a lone caribou bull through a blizzard so dense he had to navigate by the changing feel of snow beneath his feet. Another hunter described the delicate skill required to read thin cracks in sea ice. A seamstress told a humorous tale about a fox who repeatedly stole scraps of fur from outside her shelter. The stories were not meant to entertain in a loud way. They were meant to bind the community, to remind everyone of shared knowledge and shared endurance. When the time felt right, Tullamark placed his hand lightly on Akaluk's shoulder. The meaning was unmistakable. It was time for him to speak. Akaluk felt his pulse quicken, but the room remained gentle and expectant. He spoke quietly, describing his first successful seal hunt. He talked about the silence of the moment, the focus he had felt, the gratitude he experienced afterward. He kept his words simple, steady, and true. And when he finished, the room responded not with applause, but with soft nods, murmurs of approval, and the kind of warm quiet that spoke of acceptance. Later that night, as people drifted back to their shelters and the cold air settled around the village once more, Akaluk walked outside for a moment of solitude. The sky above was clear, revealing a vast field of stars that shimmered faintly through the cold. He felt something shift inside him. Not a sudden transformation, but the deepening of a long process. He was becoming, day by day, a link in a chain stretching far back, and he hoped far forward into the future. He returned inside with calm steps, carrying with him the knowledge that his place in the world was no longer uncertain. He was part of the rhythm now, the rhythm of the hunt, the craft, the land, and the stories that would someday include his own quiet voice. Long after Akaluk's lifetime, the world he knew settled quietly beneath layers of drifting snow, wind-scoured earth, and centuries of silence. Generations passed, each leaving behind small traces, fragments of tools, remnants of shelters, and the faint outlines of paths once pressed into tundra. These traces, scattered gently across the Arctic landscape, would one day guide archaeologists toward understanding how ancient hunters endured conditions that seemed impossible by modern standards. Yet even with careful study, much of their world remained shrouded in soft mystery, preserved not by deliberate design, but by the calm persistence of the cold. The Arctic, for all its harshness, is a remarkable keeper of stories. Frozen soil locks away artifacts with a tenderness that belies the climate's brutality. A dropped needle may remain where it fell for 1,000 years. The faint grooves of a knife blade, carved by steady hands in another age, survive like whispered instructions for anyone willing to look closely. And so, when researchers began uncovering tools from past cultures who thrived near the polar circle, they found not only objects, but echoes of the rhythm of daily life. There is something almost dreamlike about the way these items emerge. A harpoon head appears in the earth, its ivory still smooth enough to hold the shape of ancient craftsmanship. A piece of sinew lashing, dried and faintly twisted, suggests the careful patience of someone preparing gear for a long journey. Even fragments of clothing, worn fur, tiny stitches in hide, traces of pigment, hint at a quiet practicality that defined life in the cold north. Each discovery adds a brushstroke to a picture that is still forming, a picture of resilience balanced with subtle artistry. One of the first mysteries archaeologists encountered was the extraordinary adaptability of these ancient hunters. Their tools were far more sophisticated than originally assumed. Early explorers imagined a world of crude implements and improvised survival. But the truth revealed by excavation paints a much different scene. A world where knowledge was layered, refined, and shared across generations. Harpoons were engineered with detachable heads designed to turn once embedded, increasing their effectiveness. Sled runners were shaped in ways that minimized friction even on rough ice. Lamps carved from soft stone were designed to burn cleanly for hours on a tiny wick of moss soaked in seal oil. Such innovations suggest not desperation, but understanding, an understanding of materials, of environment, and of the quiet balance between human need and natural limitation. The Arctic hunters were not simply enduring their world, they were cooperating with it. This relationship leaves subtle marks in the archaeological record. The orientation of dwellings aligned to prevailing winds, the placement of midden heaps away from migratory paths, the patterns of discarded tools forming faint arcs around hearths. But beyond the practical, the Arctic holds mysteries of culture and spirit as well. Archaeologists have uncovered small figures carved from driftwood or bone, sometimes smoothed by handling, sometimes decorated with shallow lines. Their meanings remain gently veiled. Were they charms for hunters? Toys for children? Representations of ancestors? Perhaps they served many roles, shifting according to the needs of the moment. The ambiguity does not diminish their significance. Instead, it invites quiet contemplation. In a place where survival required constant attention, moments of stillness likely held deep importance. Another mystery lies in the communal structures. At several ancient sites, remains of unusually large snow or sod dwellings have been found, far bigger than what would be required for any single family. These structures suggest gatherings, not unlike the long night gatherings of Akaluk's time, where stories, songs, and knowledge were shared under the muted glow of flame. Archaeologists have traced the outlines of these spaces, imagining lamplight flickering across walls, illuminating faces turned toward the speaker, the air warmed by breath and quiet laughter. The record offers no clear explanation for why these communal buildings appeared when they did, or how often they were used, but their scale speaks softly of unity and shared resilience. What puzzles researchers even more is the mobility of these ancient groups. Some settlements show evidence of being used for only a single season before being abandoned. Others bear signs of repeated occupation over centuries. Yet the tools and materials found in far-flung regions often share remarkable similarities, suggesting communication across long distances. Theories range from trade networks to seasonal congregations to shared traditions passed along through visiting families. Each possibility adds another layer to the tapestry of Arctic life. One particularly intriguing find comes from the discovery of small, stone-lined pits near ancient dwellings. At first, researchers believed them to be storage caches for food. Later, some suggested they may have served as cold traps for preserving meat during times of abundance. But a newer theory suggests something quieter and more reflective, that some pits may have been used for keeping ceremonial objects, items imbued with meaning beyond practical use. Whether true or not, the idea invites us to imagine ancient hands placing something precious into the earth, trusting the cold to keep it safe until needed. As archaeologists sift through soil and ice, they often describe a sense of companionship with the people they study, not in a dramatic or sentimental way, but in a quiet, steady sense of shared humanity. A broken knife blade, worn thin from sharpening, carries a familiar story of persistence. A stack of fire-cracked stones near a former hearth speaks of evenings gathered around warm light. A child's toy, carved with simple lines, suggests affection and moments of gentle play in a world where survival was constant but not all-consuming. And yet, for every question answered, two more questions arise. Many sites show evidence of sudden abandonment. Some contain half-finished tools left as if the maker intended to return. Others reveal disruptions in patterns of animal remains, suggesting shifts in climate or migration. These mysteries remain softened by time, their sharp edges rounded by centuries of weather, but they linger nonetheless, inviting calm speculation. Even the landscape itself participates in the mystery. Driftwood found far inland hints at ancient routes of trade or travel. Piles of stones placed in deliberate arrangements mark paths across tundra that no longer carries clear footsteps. And along coastal cliffs, small rings of stones, remains of ancient tent waits, overlook waters where hunting parties once stood in silence, watching for movement beneath the surface. Archaeology in the Arctic is not driven by urgency or spectacle. It moves slowly, respectfully, allowing the land to reveal what it chooses. Researchers must wait for the right season, the right temperature, the right moment when the earth softens just enough to offer a fragment. And even then, every discovery is treated with a calm awareness that these are more than artifacts. They're the lasting breaths of people who lived intimately with wind, ice, and long, quiet nights. And so the mysteries remain, not troubling, but serene. They form a gentle fog around the edges of understanding, encouraging anyone who studies them to move slowly, breathe deeply, and welcome the uncertainties as part of the story. In this way, the ancient Arctic world continues to whisper across the centuries, inviting us into its soft, enduring silence. In the soft quiet of the archaeological record, some of the most intriguing clues are those that point not simply to tools or dwellings, but to the inner life of the ancient Arctic peoples, their beliefs, their symbolic systems, and the subtle ways they expressed meaning in a land where survival depended on constant vigilance. What emerges from the earth is not a complete picture, but a constellation of hints, each one inviting a slow, contemplative reading. One such hint lies in the discovery of intricately carved amulets found scattered across regions once inhabited by hunter-gatherer groups. These amulets, some shaped like small animals, others like abstract forms, were often worn smooth from handling. Archaeologists believe they may have been carried not only for protection, but also as a quiet acknowledgement of the animals whose lives sustained the people. These objects suggest a worldview where respect formed an essential bond between hunter and hunted, a worldview in which the act of survival was intertwined with gratitude. Many of the carvings depict caribou, seals, or birds, but their lines are not sharp or decorative in the ornamental sense. Instead, they follow flowing, natural contours, as though the artist sought to evoke the movement of the animal rather than its precise appearance. Some feature shallow marks that may represent migrations, winds, or water currents. These subtle choices offer a glimpse into the way ancient hunters perceived their environment, not just as a backdrop for life, but as a living, breathing presence with rhythms as steady as their own. Archaeologists have also uncovered traces of pigment, faint red, ochre-staining stone tools, and, in rare cases, the interior walls of former dwellings. The presence of pigment is always a quiet surprise in such an environment, since color fades easily over centuries. Its appearance suggests that even in the muted tones of the Arctic winter, people sought moments of expression, perhaps marking ceremonial tools, perhaps painting symbols known only to their own community. These touches of color, so modest yet intentional, add a gentle warmth to the otherwise pale archaeology of the far north. But perhaps the most mysterious features found across Arctic sites are the stone alignments. Carefully placed arrangements of rocks, sometimes forming circles, sometimes lines that follow the rise of distant hills. Some appear to mark former tent sites, but others seem too large, too deliberate, or too symbolically oriented to be simple structural remains. A few alignments have been found pointing toward points on the horizon where the sun appears during the brief Arctic dawns of midwinter, suggesting a quiet awareness of the sky's cycles. Though these interpretations remain speculative, they inspire a sense of wonder, an appreciation for how ancient people might have watched the slow return of light each year. Another cultural mystery lies in the distribution of children's toys found at several sites. These toys, tiny sleds, miniature harpoons, small carved animals, offer a gentler perspective on life in the ancient Arctic. Their presence indicates that teaching began early, and that play was a vital part of learning. The toys often mimic the tools adults used, but are shaped from lighter materials, suggesting deliberate guidance. They show not only affection, but a thoughtful method of introducing the rhythms of daily life to the next generation. Within the remains of certain dwellings, archaeologists have discovered small alcoves carved into snow walls or marked with stones and sod houses. These alcoves are too small for storage and are sometimes adorned with faint impressions that may once have held charms or ceremonial items. Their presence suggests quiet spaces for reflection, small sanctuaries within the home, whether used for honoring ancestors or for quiet personal rituals. These spaces reflect an interior world that archaeology can glimpse but never fully recover. One of the enigmas that continues to puzzle researchers is the pattern of tool distribution across regions separated by vast distances. Carved ivory points found in one settlement match the craftsmanship of tools discovered hundreds of kilometers away. Stone blades reveal similar shaping methods despite originating from different generations. Such similarities could indicate shared cultural traditions, migration patterns, or extensive communication networks. Whatever the reason, the tools serve as a reminder that even in a challenging environment, human connection reached far beyond immediate communities. The landscape itself, however, holds one of the most enduring mysteries. Across certain coastal areas, archaeologists have found elongated pits filled with stones heated by long-forgotten fires. These pits may have been used for cooking large animals, but in some cases, their size and placement suggest they could have served ceremonial or communal functions. Some pits are positioned overlooking bays known for rich marine life. Others appear on high ridges, where the wind carries sound with surprising clarity. Their purpose remains softly hidden, but their consistent presence implies a shared practice valued by multiple generations. Even more enigmatic are the rare finds of objects deliberately placed far from settlement sites. A carved wooden object buried deep within the tundra, far from any known dwelling, suggests intentional placement. A solitary harpoon point inserted into a crack in a cliffside raises quiet questions. Were these offerings? Markers? Signs left for travelers? The intentionality behind their placement lingers like a whisper across time. Perhaps the most compelling mystery emerges not from what has been found, but from what has not. Large-scale artwork, elaborate ceremonial structures, and written systems leave no trace in the Arctic archaeological record. Instead, meaning appears woven gently into daily life, carried in the shape of tools, expressed in the orientation of dwellings, whispered through the careful placement of stones. This absence of grand monuments does not indicate a lack of culture. Instead, it suggests a worldview where significance lived in the small, the practical, the communal, and the quietly symbolic. Archaeologists often describe their work in the Arctic as a process of learning to listen, listening to the landscape, to patterns of soil, to faint scars in the earth where human hands once shaped their world. Each artifact uncovered is not simply an object, but a doorway into an older rhythm. The rhythm of the people who endured wind, winter, and silence with patience and skill. Their mysteries remain, not as puzzles to be solved urgently, but as calmly unfolding stories that encourage slow contemplation. And in this gentle process of uncovering, the ancient Arctic world becomes less distant. It becomes a place where human intention lingers softly, where time moves like drifting snow, and where every discovery, no matter how small, invites us to imagine the quiet lives that once shaped the frozen landscape. As excavations expanded and researchers ventured deeper into the Arctic's quiet landscape, the mysteries grew not fewer, but more intricately woven. Each new discovery added context, yet also expanded the horizon of the unknown, like a soft snowfall that both reveals and obscures the ground beneath. And in this gentle balance between clarity and uncertainty, the story of ancient Arctic hunters continued to unfold, subtly, patiently, in ways that encouraged slow reflection rather than quick conclusions. One of the most perplexing findings involved traces of ancient musical instruments. These were not large or elaborate, but small, fragments of hollowed bone that may have served as flutes, and pieces of driftwood carved with shallow notches that would have produced rhythmic sounds when struck. While no complete instrument has survived intact, the fragments suggest a quiet musical tradition. Not performance in the theatrical sense, but perhaps rhythmic sounds used during group activities or calming melodies played during long winter nights. The Arctic stillness would have carried even soft notes far across snow, creating a gentle soundscape in a world dominated by wind. This possibility opens a door to imagining evening gatherings where voices rose in low chants, accompanied by simple instruments. Archaeologists can only speculate, yet the presence of worn surfaces around certain bone fragments indicates they were held often, handled with care, perhaps used in rituals or as comfort during difficult seasons. The idea that song or sound played a role in survival gives a deeper sense of humanity to a culture already marked by quiet resilience. Another mystery lies in the elaborate patterns found carved into some ancient sled runners. These patterns, curving and intersecting in fluid lines, appear too detailed to serve solely decorative purposes. Some researchers believe the markings functioned as identifiers for specific families or traveling groups. Others suggest they may have held symbolic meaning, perhaps invoking protection for long journeys or honoring the animals whose strength carried the sled forward. The carvings are subtle, not meant to catch the eye immediately, but to be discovered gradually, as though they were meant to be understood only by those who traveled with the sled. One of the more intriguing discoveries involved a cluster of stone circles found far inland. These circles contained no hearth remains, no fragments of tools, no evidence of prolonged occupation. They seemed instead to mark places of pause, perhaps for navigation or ritual. Some archaeologists propose that these circles served as meeting points where hunters waited for migrating herds. Others suspect they might have been places where families left offerings before long journeys. Whatever their purpose, the circles stand as quiet testaments to moments of intention. Moments when ancient people paused in the vastness of the landscape and marked their presence with simple stones. The Arctic also preserves unusual traces of movement. In certain regions, layers of packed snow and ice have revealed faint impressions from long-vanished sled runners. These impressions, visible only during brief seasonal thaws, suggest routes that crisscrossed the tundra with surprising consistency. The paths point to a deep geographical memory, knowledge of how to navigate a world without landmarks, using wind patterns, snowdrifts, and the subtle shapes of distant hills. These ephemeral traces highlight the profound connection ancient hunters had with the land, a connection so strong it left marks that survived centuries. One of the more enigmatic finds to emerge in recent decades involves caches of tools intentionally buried beneath heavy stones. The tools in these caches, harpoon points, blades, needles, were arranged carefully, sometimes in patterns suggesting deliberate placement. Theories abound. Some believe these caches were reserves for future seasons. Others suggest they were offerings marking significant events. Still others propose they held symbolic meaning, perhaps representing the tools of a departed hunter. Whatever the truth, the care with which the items were arranged suggests reverence rather than mere practicality. In some excavated dwellings, archaeologists discovered that sleeping platforms were built with layers of moss and fur arranged in a specific pattern. This pattern, repeated across distant sites, suggests a shared tradition, perhaps a method for insulation, perhaps a symbolic arrangement tied to beliefs about protection during sleep. Sleep itself was a vulnerable state in the Arctic, and any tradition that brought comfort or reassurance would have held deep significance. These platforms, though simple in construction, hint at a cultural emphasis on rest, renewal, and the warmth of shared space. The presence of carved wooden masks adds yet another layer of mystery. Only a handful survive, but their features are stylized. Elongated noses, hollow eyes, and faintly curved mouths. Some masks resemble animals, others humans. Their surfaces show traces of pigment, indicating they may once have been painted. Whether used in ceremonies, storytelling, or teaching, the masks point to a rich symbolic life, one that unfolded quietly in the shelter of winter storms or in communal gatherings. Their existence invites gentle wonder. What stories did they help convey, and what meanings have drifted away like breath in cold air? Animal remains found in middens. The refuse piles near dwellings tell additional stories. The distribution of bones suggests not only what was eaten, but how resources were shared. Some piles contain bones from multiple species, indicating diverse diets. Others show evidence of systematic processing, suggesting communal feasts. In a few cases, unusually intact bones hint that certain parts of animals may have been reserved for ritual or symbolic use. These patterns reveal a balance between survival and meaning, where practical necessity intertwined seamlessly with cultural expression. The Arctic also preserves rare footprints embedded in layers of ancient silt. These footprints, preserved accidentally by sudden freezes, offer some of the most intimate connections to the past. Some show the deep, steady impressions of adults carrying heavy loads. Others reveal the lighter steps of children walking alongside, their footprints smaller but just as purposeful. A few footprint sets show playful patterns, circles, zigzags, and sudden stops, suggesting moments of spontaneous joy amid the cold. These prints, frozen in place for centuries, echo with the soft rhythm of life in a way few artifacts can. And then there are the anomalies, objects found far from where they should be. A piece of driftwood carved into a handle discovered hundreds of kilometers inland. A stone blade made from material found only near distant shores. A bone pendant styled in a manner seen in another region entirely. These anomalies hint at travel routes far more extensive than once believed. They suggest that ancient Arctic hunters moved across vast distances, carrying stories, tools, and knowledge along paths known only to them. The land, in this sense, was not an obstacle, but a familiar companion. All these mysteries, carved sleds, ancient footprints, caches of tools, faint traces of pigment, form a quiet constellation of clues. Together, they reveal a culture grounded in patience, skill, and deep connection to the land. Yet they also leave room for wonder. The Arctic does not give away its secrets quickly. It encourages slow study, gentle interpretation, and a willingness to accept that some questions will remain open, soft-edged, and timeless. In this lingering uncertainty lies the beauty of Arctic archaeology. The past does not shout its story, it whispers. It whispers through the polished surface of a bone tool, through the grain of driftwood shaped by careful hands, through the faint line of a footprint preserved in ancient frost. Each whisper invites us to lean in, breathe slowly, and imagine the quiet lives that once shaped the frozen world. Imagine, once again, the rhythmic hush of the Arctic wind brushing against the soft walls of a snow shelter. As you rest within that imagined quiet, we turn now to the gentle structures that shaped life in these ancient northern communities, structures that were neither rigid nor ostentatious, but subtle, like the gradient of twilight across the winter sky. In the lands where frozen seas stretched far beyond the horizon, social order formed slowly, almost imperceptibly, emerging from need, wisdom, and survival rather than any formal decree. Unlike the more centralized civilizations to the south, Arctic societies relied on flexible roles that shifted with the seasons. The rhythm of life demanded cooperation rather than competition. Here, prestige grew not from the accumulation of wealth, but from the steady reliability of one's presence. The skill of a hunter who always shared his catch, the calm judgment of an elder who guided decisions, the patience of a seamstress whose careful stitching kept the bitter wind at bay. Their influence was quiet, built not on command, but on trust, woven into the everyday motion of the group. Families gathered in clustered dwellings, each home like a dimly glowing ember in the vast whiteness. Though connected by kinship, each family created its own warm interior world. Status existed, but it had little to do with dominance. Instead, those admired were the ones who ensured the continuation of the community's rhythm. Those who understood the migrations of animals, the shifting routes of sea ice, or the delicate art of shaping tools from bone without waste. Their knowledge held the same weight as a guiding star. During long winter nights, storytelling played a gentle role in reinforcing social order. Stories drifted slowly around the communal space, accompanied by the soft crackle of burning blubber lamps. These narratives reminded listeners of ancestral deeds, of lessons learned in storms or during lean times. Elders, wrapped in thick furs, spoke with unhurried calm, their voices blending with the faint hum of the wind outside. Through these spoken histories, the community affirmed who they were, what had been endured, and how balance must always be preserved within the group. Even leadership took on a gentle, almost invisible quality. There were no thrones, crowns, or carved emblems of authority. Instead, leaders emerged through consensus, recognized for their steadiness rather than any hunger for control. In moments of danger, a drifting ice sheet, an unexpected scarcity of seal breathing holes, or the uneasy quiet that suggested a storm's approach, their voice carried more weight. But even then, decisions flowed through conversation and shared understanding. This flexible structure allowed the community to shift naturally with circumstances, just as snow drifts change their shape with each passing wind. Trade introduced another layer of subtle social distinction. Groups living near the coast often exchanged goods with those who traveled inland. Carvings of ivory, furs of varying thickness, and carefully crafted needles or tools moved silently between hands. These exchanges were not marked by bustling markets or boisterous bargaining. Instead, trade occurred through calm visits, slow discussions, and mutual recognition of needs. It reinforced relationships and ensured resilience. A hunter known for generous trades might be remembered with quiet gratitude long after his return journey. Across these networks, artisans held a unique place. Their careful hands shaped objects that were both practical and surprisingly graceful. Bone toggles polished smooth as river stones, miniature carvings that captured the curve of a whale or the posture of a resting dog. These pieces were not displayed for vanity, but cherished for the equilibrium they brought to everyday tasks. In the flickering lamplight, such objects seemed almost to shimmer with the memory of the hands that made them. Artisans, though not always leaders, enjoyed a gentle respect, for their work preserved both beauty and survival. Even gender roles were marked by fluidity and cooperation. While certain tasks leaned toward particular individuals, sewing, hunting, tool-making, necessity often blurred these boundaries. The cold did not discriminate, and so neither could the people. A person who excelled at a task naturally became its steward, regardless of convention. In this way, knowledge flowed more freely, and the group strengthened its ability to adapt to the long cycles of the Arctic year. The contrast between these social patterns and modern expectations can be quietly striking. There were no rigid hierarchies, no loud declarations of rank or power. Instead, roles formed organically, shifting with age, experience, and the soft demands of the land itself. Imagine that sense of interdependence, a network of calm, mutual reliance, where every contribution, no matter how small, rippled gently outward to support the whole. As we continue through this segment, we'll explore how these roles became more defined during major gatherings, seasonal hunts, and shared rituals. For now, allow the simple harmony of this social world to settle gently over your thoughts, like a fresh snowfall smoothing the contours of a long-traveled path. As the seasons shifted across the ancient Arctic, subtle yet significant changes rippled through the fabric of community life. Even in a land where winter seemed endless and daylight sometimes faded into weeks of soft twilight, people followed a rhythm that moved with the migrations of animals and the turning of the sky. In this rhythm, gatherings and ceremonies played a quiet, essential role. They were not lavish spectacles or grand festivals, but slow, intentional moments when the bonds among families deepened, reaffirming the shared work of survival. Picture the first hints of spring light brushing the horizon, its pale glow reflecting off the frozen coastline. Hunters, returning from long journeys across the ice, approached the familiar cluster of dwellings. Their silhouettes moved slowly, accompanied by the soft crunch of snow beneath their boots. As they arrived, no shouts or cheers broke the calm. Instead, greetings unfolded with warmth expressed through gestures, a gentle clasping of arms, a nod, an offering of freshly hunted meat. These reunions carried the weight of trust and the reassurance of continuity. During such seasonal gatherings, families that had spent months rotating between hunting grounds and sheltered camps came together to share resources, stories, and quiet companionship. Communal meals were among the central rituals. Food, hard-earned and carefully prepared, became a symbol of resilience. Large cuts of seal, meat simmered slowly in stone vessels, releasing a faint aroma mingled with the steady warmth of blubber lamps. Elders sat near the center of the communal space, while children, wrapped in soft furs, drifted in and out of drowsy curiosity. These feasts were not only sustenance. They reaffirmed the delicate hierarchy of respect and interdependence. The first portions were often shared with those who contributed most, not as a reward, but as recognition of responsibility. The hunter who risked the uncertain ice might receive a portion not for prestige, but because his strength would again be needed soon. In this way, hierarchy remained fluid and mutual, a gentle exchange rather than a strict chain of command. Ceremonial moments also carried a quiet gravity. When the time came to prepare for a large seasonal whale hunt, a slow ritual unfolded. Tools were laid out respectfully before the community. Harpoons with polished bone tips, finely braided lines, wooden floats sealed with care. Elders murmured words that blended memory with guidance, invoking not divine spectacle, but the continuity of knowledge. Their voices carried like soft echoes across the snow, reminding listeners that every action drew upon the efforts of ancestors. Children observed these rituals with wide, steady eyes, absorbing lessons through repetition and silence. They learned not from loud proclamations, but from the unhurried rhythm of the adults around them. A young boy or girl might be asked to hand a tool to an elder or help set out the equipment, a small gesture that affirmed their place in the community's future. These early roles grew over years, shaping individuals not through strict instruction, but through gentle expectation. Certain gatherings also carried the function of maintaining social harmony. In a land where every individual mattered and cooperation was essential, conflicts needed resolution before they hardened into resentment. Disputes, perhaps over a hunting route or the division of a catch, or an unspoken slight were addressed with calm, measured conversation. The oldest members often listened the longest before speaking, their words soft but firm. They did not command, they guided, nudging the community back toward balance. These moments held great significance, keeping peace within the interconnected web of families. Traveling groups who arrived from neighboring regions brought a different kind of ceremony. Their visits were unhurried events, marked by shared meals and the exchange of crafted objects. Carved amulets, intricately etched with representations of animals or spirits, passed between hands as tokens of goodwill. Visitors shared news of distant hunting grounds or changes in the migration of sea mammals. Such visits strengthened alliances, ensuring that in times of scarcity or danger, help would not be far away. Amid these seasonal rhythms, quieter ceremonies took place within the family home. When a young person crafted their first tool, a bow, a needle, or a harpoon point, there was a subdued acknowledgement, a gesture that recognized the transition from reliance to contribution. The family gathered around as the new item was tested, admired, and gently encouraged. Small achievements were celebrated not with exuberance, but with the soft satisfaction of continuity. Even a landscape played a part in these social rituals. A certain cliff face, dark against the snow, might serve as the meeting point for several families. A sheltered cove could become the preferred place for launching boats at the start of the hunting season. These sites carried quiet meaning, accumulated over generations, their significance woven into stories passed down during long nights around the lamp. Through all of this, the community moved like a single organism, slow, deliberate, and adaptable. Ceremonies, though never grand, reinforced the values that sustained them: cooperation, patience, reverence for the natural world, and respect for experience. When storms returned or food supplies thinned, these relationships held firm. They created a sense of stability that allowed individuals to face uncertainty without fear. As we continue into the final part of this segment, we will explore how travelers, shamans, and visitors from beyond the immediate settlement added new layers of meaning to Arctic social life. But for now, let the gentle rhythm of these gatherings settle into your thoughts, as soft and unhurried as falling snow. As we move into the final part of this segment, imagine again the stillness of the ancient Arctic night. The horizon stretches outward, untouched and unbroken, and the muted glow of the moon settles softly across the snow. Within this quiet expanse, the arrival of outsiders, whether shamans, travelers, or distant kin, added new currents to the calm flow of daily life. These encounters were never dramatic or disruptive. Instead, they unfolded slowly, shaping the social atmosphere with subtle hints of mystery and shared understanding. Travelers were rare but welcome presences. A lone figure approaching across the frozen coastline might be spotted long before they arrived, their silhouette small against the vast white plain. Families watched with a calm curiosity, noting the traveler's pace, the direction from which they came, and the way they carried themselves. When the visitor finally reached the cluster of homes, the greeting was polite and measured. No grand announcements marked their arrival, just a steady acknowledgement, a quiet invitation to rest within the warmth of the snow house, and a bowl of food offered without hesitation. Travelers brought information as precious as any material resource. They carried news of shifting caribou herds, of new cracks forming in distant ice, of changes in wind patterns or currents that might alter the whale migration routes. Their stories were told slowly, in even tones, with long pauses between sentences, as though the tales themselves needed time to settle into the space. Listeners leaned in slightly, allowing the traveler's experience to blend with their own understanding of the land. These exchanges strengthened ties between groups separated by hundreds of miles of snow and sea. Through these connections, people learned not just about the environment, but about the quiet customs of others, their crafting techniques, their songs, their ways of honoring the animals they depended upon. A community enriched by such insights became more adaptable, more capable of weathering the unpredictable cycles of the Arctic. Among the most respected visitors were shamans, individuals who moved between the ordinary world and the realm of stories, memory, and spirit. These figures rarely displayed outward signs of authority. Their clothing might have been simple, their tools unadorned. Yet when they entered a dwelling, a hush often fell across the room, not out of fear, but from a collective recognition of the shaman's role as a bridge between visible and invisible forces. Shamans were consulted during difficult hunts, long illnesses, or periods of environmental uncertainty. Their rituals were quiet affairs, relying on rhythmic breathing, slow gestures, and the steady beat of a small drum. In the dim glow of the oil lamp, the shaman's movement seemed to blend with the shadows on the curved snow walls. Their voice, sometimes low and murmured, guided the household through an exploration of possibility, searching for meaning, clarity, or reassurance rather than offering dramatic revelations. People viewed shamans not as elite figures in a hierarchical sense, but as custodians of balance. Their wisdom came from long observation of the natural world, patterns in the behavior of animals, the shifting colors of the sky, or the timeless stories carved into ivory objects passed down through generations. A shaman's insights were offered gently, like a soft suggestion rather than a command. Their purpose was not to lead, but to steady the community when uncertainty cast its long shadow over the land. Visitors from distant groups sometimes brought objects that carried cultural weight. A carved mask used in winter storytelling, a polished bone amulet symbolizing protection, or a small pouch filled with powdered minerals from faraway cliffs, all held quiet significance. These items were not valuable in a commercial sense. Instead, they represented relationships, journeys, and shared human presence in a landscape where life was often solitary. Within each community, individuals who hosted these visitors did so with calm hospitality. A warm spot near the lamp was offered, food was shared without ceremony, and stories were exchanged slowly with an appreciation for unhurried conversation. Hospitality was an expression of respect, not a display of wealth. In welcoming a traveler, people affirmed the larger network of human connection that stretched across the Arctic. Children observed these interactions with wide, silent attentiveness. They watched the way adults listened, the way questions were asked softly, the way a traveler's tired hands were offered gloves or warm water. Through these moments, they learned about generosity and the gentle diplomacy that held communities together. These lessons became the foundation of their understanding of the world. Even the environment played a role in shaping social interactions with visitors. A storm might delay a traveler's departure, giving them days of rest within the settlement. A shift in wind might send them off earlier than expected. Each departure was understated. A small exchange of thanks, a final shared meal, a few murmured words of safe travel. The traveler then stepped out into the vast white landscape, becoming once more a single dark shape moving steadily across the snow. In this quiet interplay between guests, shamans, and everyday families, we see the softer contours of Arctic social life. Prestige was subtle, expressed through wisdom, hospitality, and the ability to interpret the land's many quiet signals. Outsiders did not disrupt the community. They enriched it, adding new threads to a tapestry woven slowly across generations. As we prepare to move into the closing section of our long journey, let this calm interplay of relationships linger in your thoughts, much like the soft echo of footsteps fading into a winter night. And now, as our long and gentle journey through the ancient Arctic draws to a close, allow yourself to settle even more deeply into a state of rest. You have wandered through quiet snow dwellings, joined hunters beneath dim horizons, listened to elders whose voices flowed with the calm rhythm of generations, and watched as travelers and shamans wove new connections through timeless, icy landscapes. All of these moments, steady, unhurried, and soft, invite the mind to drift, just as the Arctic winds drift across endless fields of white. Here, at the edge of this sleepy narrative, Imagine once more the faint glow of a blubber lamp flickering against smooth snow walls. Picture the calm breath of the community settling into night, the gentle shifting of fur clothing, and the quiet assurance that every person has contributed their part to the seamless flow of survival. The ancient Arctic, with all its challenges and quiet triumphs, offers us a reminder of the resilience and interconnectedness of human life, a reminder expressed not through drama or spectacle, but through patience, cooperation, and the soft persistence of tradition. As you rest, take comfort in knowing that the world you live in now, with warm rooms, soft blankets, and the hum of familiar modern comforts, is far removed from those frigid fields. Yet, within you, there remains the quiet ability to appreciate their stillness, their deliberate pace, their gentle understanding of the land. The rhythm of their lives, calm and steady, continues to echo faintly, like a heartbeat beneath layers of snow. If this soft-spoken history helped you unwind, breathe a little deeper, or drift closer to sleep, you are always welcome to return. And if you feel moved, only if it truly brought you peace, feel free to like the video, subscribe to Sleepy Historian, or share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Somehow, it is comforting to imagine all of you scattered across the world, settling into rest with the same gentle stories. For now, let your thoughts become lighter, like snowflakes settling on a still winter evening. Let your breathing soften, steady and slow. Allow the stories to fade into the background, becoming part of the quiet around you. Whenever you are ready, you can drift into sleep, carried by the calm currents of these ancient memories. Thank you for spending this time with me. May your night be restful, your dreams gentle, and your sleep deep. Good night.